It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here today. When Professor Jay Cook called me, I was elated. First of all, I studied here in Ann Arbor from '76 to 1980. Yes, I am that old. Don't let the hair color fool you. And I came back in '91 to defend. I flew in, I defended, I flew out. Between '80 and '91, unfortunately, I lost my dissertation advisor, the late Richard Mitchell, who was a blessed memory and a great advisor and someone I was extremely fond of. And that, I have to say, threw me into a bit of a lurch, like, what do I do now? And it took me a few years to get back on track. I went into a number of jobs, mostly in Washington, NGO sector, political organizing, learning about American government. By the way, all good skills that came back to help me. And then I had the good fortune to have Professor Ron Suni and in particular Professor Juan Cole, who I believe are still here in the department. Juan read every chapter and communicated with me and was kind enough to reconstruct my committee for me, so I was able to finally, as my dad was waiting with bated breath, finally, I defended my dissertation and I could be doctora, which was a very important thing. So I am a retired Foreign Service officer. I'm very proud of the collective body of individuals and colleagues with whom I work. It's always an honor to work for the United States government. Public service is something that I had aspired to, I guess sort of not knowing that I aspired to it, and I'll come to this. My father was a professor, so I understood academia, I understood academic life. It was something that I thought would be a great profession to go into, but times were tough in '91. There is an expression in Arabic that's a literal reference that says, winds blow where ships do not wish to go. And I wasn't sure, did I want to go into academia? I was applying to jobs. I mean, I didn't even get a call back. I didn't get an interview. I got a form letter. It was that bad in '91. I think I got a few bites from some very small places in parts of the country I wasn't as familiar with. I have to admit, I'm a bi-coastal kind of person. I'm not an elite, but I am a bi-coastal person. Ann Arbor was my one Midwest experience, and I hardly call this typical. So I decided at that point, okay, I gotta look around, and I have to see what sticks. There's another thing I want to raise, and this is going to something that I think has been raised by others. And Jackie, thank you so much for raising this last night. When I was a graduate student, as I mentioned last night, I was on a National Defense Foreign Language Scholarship. So I was learning Arabic, I was doing my coursework, I was making progress, good grades. You had to, because they wouldn't renew you the second year if you weren't making good grades. So I felt like, okay, I'm on a good path. I had the great fortune of getting a Fulbright scholarship to do my doctoral research, which I did in Egypt and in Beirut. So I felt like, okay, I'm on the right path. But there was something that bothered me, and it wasn't in the teaching. The professors were fine, and they taught me a lot. But what I found was that I wasn't comfortable with the way history was going in the new way it was supposed to be studied and explained and taught. I didn't get it. And it made no sense to me. What was postmodernism? How is it you're supposed to talk about a subject knowing that there are things you can't see? So I was, at that time, when I was in Cairo doing research and with my fellow colleagues who've all gone on to NYU and Stanford, and they're great guys, and maybe one woman, great guys. And I like them very much. They would ask me, well, what's the theoretical construct of what you're writing? And I would say, Like, what do you mean? So it took me a while to understand that I wanted to write about intellectual history. I'm in the archives. I'm reading dusty old books and newspapers and stuff from 100 years old, filled with Cairo dust, which probably still resides in my lungs. I wanted to write about this and analyze it and look for the data points and find out what was the narrative, what was the story, why was this person I'm studying so instrumental, why was he innovative, why did he create a big uproar, who were for him, who was against him, where was the religious establishment. That's what I wanted to study. And I sure didn't want to have somebody telling me, here's the European construct in which all of this should fit. I couldn't buy it. So I finished my research, went back, all of it in Arabic, which was a struggle. I translated so much stuff. And then when Dick Mitchell died, I sat there and thought, I don't know. Do I really want to do this? Is this me? Does it fit in? I'm too restless. So I was a news junkie. I was someone who hadn't lived in one place for a very long time. And I started to look and say, I think I have to go to Washington. Washington is where I will find something. So I started out with a job in an NGO. I defended my dissertation, I interviewed for the job for the NGO, and took the Foreign Service exam in the space of one weekend. I mean, between Friday and Saturday, I did all of that. And because I said, I'm going to throw out all of this stuff and see what sticks. Be flexible, think about it, just see. You know, what's the worst that you're going to do? Tell you no? Right, so they tell you no, then you move on. Well, it all came back. I finished the degree, got the NGO job, which, oh, by the way, was a principal investigator on a U.S. aid grant doing work in the Middle East with projects with embassies. Great. They pay me to travel, I use my language skills, and I'm supposed to be investigating all those data points I learned to string together. And then I went and took the Foreign Service exam, totally unprepared, unlike everybody else who studied for it. And then I get a letter saying, you passed. I said, damn. What do I do? Then I said, okay, I went and took the oral exam. I passed. Then they said, come back, you've studied Arabic, we want to test you in language. So I took the exam, unprepared, just walked in and took it on a lunch break from my other job. I passed. So I said, okay, I guess this is God's way of telling me this is the direction I'm going. So you know, sometimes things happen. It's like you say, how did you fall into this? How did you go this way? If you leave yourself open to opportunities, you will be amazed what comes your way, and all of a sudden you'll start seeing the signals of the path that you want to take. I was lucky in my jobs. When I joined the Foreign Service, I spent my entire career in the Middle East. It's not a quiet bureau. It's not a quiet part of the world. You have to be able to be really flexible and think about what it is you're going to do. My first job was Jerusalem. I was there in the West Bank when the Palestinian Authority took over the West Bank in 1994. I was there when Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated, and we all of a sudden had plane loads of people from Washington descending upon us. In Amman, my second post, I was there for the death of King Hussein and the arrival of President Clinton on the eve of the impeachment proceedings in the Congress. It was such a weird time in so many ways, I can't even begin to explain it. I had the privilege to serve as the embassy spokesperson in Baghdad during the Gulf War. This was during the surge in 2008, and when we were negotiating the status of forces agreement, where I worked very closely with the military. Why I'm telling you these things is not because I am any different than any other of my colleagues. I think if you've been listening to the hearings, you realize how important the work, what it is they do and how important it is. But what I'm telling you is because you are there not only witnessing history, but shaping history and being a part of it. And I have to say, for somebody who is a news junkie like me, to think that they pay you to do this was my idea of a job. I thought this was great. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the building of transfer. Oh, no, don't tell me 5 minutes. Okay. I have a few more. Building transferable skills. I have a few more. Knowledge. Everything I learned in training in history from the time I was an undergraduate and a graduate student, whether it was in Beirut or here, all of that knowledge I put to use. Do not think that that knowledge is never going to show the light of day. That's particularly true when you work in parts of the world that for U.S. national security interests are critical. And actually, that's anywhere in the world. It depends what day of the week is it. Is it China and North Korea? Is it the Middle East and the Persian Gulf, where, by the way, I spent about 14 years of my life, so I feel like I know it pretty well. Latin America, Venezuela, and Colombia. I mean, every area has something to offer. So how you work the issue of history into your everyday work. These parts of the world, memories are long. And unlike us, where we have short attention spans, these folks remember everything. And they want you to be able to understand why certain things are important to them. When you have relationships, why it's important. For example, one time I was in a meeting with a Gulf leader, and I had somebody in Washington from the NSC, sorry, NSC, but they were pushing me on a particular line that had to do with Turkey. And I'm sitting there thinking, have these folks not heard of the Ottoman Empire? Do they not understand that the Ottoman Empire was the seat of the caliphate and was the Islamic representative for 500 years across this region? Do they not understand that for many countries in the Gulf that now have assumed the mantle of Islam, that any role of Turkey and its imposition would be seen as threatening and counterproductive? How could they ask this? Well, they didn't study history, so they didn't know. I will like to also remember one course that I took here at Michigan that was extremely helpful, and that was the late Louise Tilley's course on social history. I mean, she had all these great European historian students. I was the weird one, like what was I doing in that class? But I learned about modes of production and working classes in the city of York in England. I understood how you do anthropology and sociology and economics and demography, and you work it in with archival research, and you understand the interlocking pieces of what it means. It taught me to understand, how do you predict these developments, like in the Arab Spring? Arab Spring broke in 2011. I was sitting in Saudi Arabia. And I can tell you the U.S. government was watching the reaction there very, very carefully, worried about these monarchies in the Gulf that are allies. And oh, by the way, where we have military bases, between Afghanistan and Egypt, we have over 35,000 military troops stationed that are U.S. troops and big bases there. So what does that mean and how do you predict it? Languages. I had the best Arabic training here at the University of Michigan. Many of the faculty, I don't even know if they're with us till this day. But why language is important in our line of work? Your ability to have credibility, your ability to talk to anybody at any level and be understood, and more importantly, to actively listen and understand what they're saying. You build trust, you build relationships, and your value added is that you can be able to report back and interpret events on the ground in ways that your other colleagues have no way to do, but you do it as a United States representative standing in your shoes, but understanding what they are saying. It was important many times, particularly the military. General Petraeus came out one day and he had a meeting with King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, and there was an interpreter in the room, and there were some tensions on issues with Iraq. Okay, I'll probably get into trouble because I know this is not Chatham House rules, but it's all right. There was an interpreter in the room, and the king was quite excised, but as is typical of monarchs in those countries, they're very stately, they're very quiet, they keep things in a very calm voice. but what he was saying was very critical and quite sharp. The interpreter, not wanting to ruffle feathers with his U.S. guest, smoothed it over. When we walked out, General Petraeus looked at me and he said, well, I guess they're not that upset. And I looked at him, I said, are you kidding? Here's what the king said. And then I translated for him exactly what he said. He said, but that's not what, I said, that's why you take somebody who has language into the room, so you really understand. And that made a big difference in how we shaped our policy of trying to bring the GCC countries closer to Iraq at a time when the Iraqi leadership was being seen as too close to Iran. So it was a particularly difficult issue. Writing. When writing for Washington, when I first started writing cables, I'm telling you, my colleagues beat the crap out of me. They said, you can't write 17 paragraphs. And what is all of this, every little fact? You have to get into this. Bottom line, what does Washington need to know? And even in a think tank of policy, you have to be able to take this much and bring it down to this much. Don't use 5 words, if 3 words will do. And the most important thing is, what you're writing important or relevant? You have to be able to answer the question, so what? Why does it matter to the people in Washington who are reading this? You don't have to demonstrate that you are contributing to the entire body of knowledge, or that you even know the entire body of knowledge. You have to show what part of that body of knowledge is important, link it to developments on the ground, and what ramifications it has for our U.S. national security interests, and if you have any recommendations moving forward for Washington to consider. That's a very specific writing skill that is not taught in academia, but could be taught if a class were structured in a way to do so. Okay, I'm watching. Public speaking. Oh, wait, one more thing. Note-taking. Now, I teach at Georgetown, and I teach undergraduates, actually, which I'm very happy about. And they come in with their laptops, and they open them, and then as I'm talking or somebody else is talking, there's discussion, I see them like blankly staring into space. And I'm going, what the hell are they getting out of this discussion? Are they understanding? So I told them, all right, you cannot just download from your ears to your brain down to your fingers. It has to go through your brain in a way that processes what's important, what isn't, what's relevant, what's the trend. So actually I didn't ban them, but I said note-taking has to be done by hand. If you go into a meeting with a head of state, you're not taking electronics into that meeting. You are taking a small pad and a pen. You have to understand what's important and how to get it down. For someone who was trained in class to take notes and take your notebook home and then understand what's the conversation and reconstruct, I have to admit, having been out of the classroom for so long, I was shocked that these kids didn't really know how to do it. But by the time class was done, they knew how to do it. Public speaking. Go out and communicate. Build your skills. But as you said, know your different audiences. Understand that you can talk to a Rotary Club. By the way, as graduate students, you can go out and talk to lots of organizations that would love to hear from you. Practice your skills, talking to academics who know something about it, to lay people who know nothing about it. Practice on going to areas where there might be foreign audiences or high schools, but understand that you have to be able to learn how to speak in a public way. The subcomponent of that, and it's very different than public speaking, are briefing skills. Understand how to go into a room and say, that's the principal in the room. Principal meaning the most senior official, whether it's the Secretary of State or an ambassador, and be able to take your knowledge and synthesize in 10 minutes for that individual what's important for them to know from A to Z. It's an important skill. In my class, I give them a subject matter to research, and then they come and present to the class as if we're all sitting ambassadors there, and they have to brief us. Because I think it's very important for them to understand how to learn how to do that. The same in terms of writing. When I ask them to write, take Information, distill. Give me a question that's difficult or a challenge. What are the steps? What do we need to look at in the background? What are our recommendations for moving forward? So it's organized, it's cogent, it's complete. Okay, targeted advice. Gain opportunities to look for experience. State Department offers internships every summer, and they're available. And you can come and spend 8 weeks at an embassy or in the main building in downtown Washington, and you will get real-time experience. My nephew was in Turkey when the coup took place. He's a good, fast writer. In an internship, they put him on the desk, all the situation reports back to the operations center, the White House Situation Room he was drafting, because he could draft quickly, distilled, pithy, and get the important facts back to Washington before open of business at 5 in the morning. You can get internships with think tanks. You mentioned this, with different kinds of groups, like you did with the Foundation for Middle East Peace. They take graduate students. They might even take new PhDs. It's a way, sometimes I meet people at think tanks and they're giving lectures on panels for the think tank and they're still working on their dissertation. But they're already networking in Washington. They're already going up and chatting up Hill staffers and putting out their brand of information and getting to be known. And then sometimes when you're looking for jobs, the Hill will say, oh yeah, that guy who used to come and brief us on X, let's reach out to him. We have a need for that on our House Foreign Affairs Committee subcommittee, because this guy is working on an area where we don't have expertise. Language and culture. Fulbrights, for example. Great opportunity to work in a foreign context and develop understanding of culture. The Center for Arabic Studies Abroad in Egypt is where I did a study of Arabic. Department of Education, Title VI money. Guys, it's out there. Go look for it. They have programs in Russian, in Mandarin, whatever. You can learn so much, and this will help you as you develop your skill set for future work. We've talked a lot about sort of digital interface, and to be honest, that's not my strong suit. I'm too old, although I do it. I did a webcast the other day. But collaboration, has been mentioned, is very important across all kinds of skill sets and all kinds of institutions. And because I've been so blatantly over my time limit, I just want to go back to the first thing. Be flexible. Look and see what's your passion. Do what you really enjoy doing. Go pinch yourself and go to work and go, I can't believe they're paying me to do this job. Because when you're jazzed about what you do, you're going to do your best work. And there are all kinds of opportunities out there. Give yourself a chance to discover them. Thank you.